Good morning, everyone. So nice to see everyone. Welcome from Hokyoji. My name is Alex. I'm a resident staffer here. Just got back from an extended visit down south, and it's very nice to be back on campus. This weekend we're hosting a retreat for Wim Hof, a Wim Hof related group, I guess, which has been really interesting during Zazen. We heard a bunch of shouting with gusto, and I guess that's signaling the end of their retreat. So it's been very fun, different sort of energy, but it's yeah, all good, very positive. They've been very appreciative, and the space is just excellent for many types. So this morning we have a special treat from our board chair, Mr. Tim Macejak. And speaking of treats, him and his partner Teresa brought some really tasty treats for us at Hokyoji, and they were 2 thumbs up, most excellent. So thank you very much for those. Tim has been practicing for over 30 years. During college, he practiced at the Iowa Zen Center, which is a peer-led sangha. And he then spent around 14 years with an at-home practice. In 2001, he began practicing with Zuiko Redding of the Cedar Rapids Zen Center, where he served as president there for 8 years. He is the author of the book Zen Unleashed, Everyday Buddhist Wisdom from Man's Best Friend, and he released that in 2013. And today, Mr. Tim's talk will be Bob the Builder Teaches Zen. So take it away, Tim, please.
Thank you, Alex. So let's start by imagining a scene. Television executive with 3 of their writers in the room for a brainstorming session. And the television executive says, okay, I want some ideas on children's shows. And turns to the first writer, and the writer says, well, I think my ideas will have this talking rabbit, and he makes lots of wisecracks, and there'll be this short little squatty hunter that tries to chase them but can never catch them. And we'll call it Bugs Bunny. And the television executive's like, sounds good. What's your idea? Turns to the second person. They say, well, we'll have this show with all sorts of Muppets, and they'll teach the kids the alphabet and numbers and stuff, and there'll be a cookie monster, and we'll call it Sesame Street. Television executive's like, sounds good. Turns to the third writer. What's your idea? Well, we'll have this stop animation cartoon, and there'll be a grown adult man as the main character, and he'll be a building contractor, and we'll call it Bob the Builder. Television executive says, you're fired. I mean, this just sounds like the craziest idea for a children's show. However, it's actually pretty decent. Ran for 10 years from 1999 to 2009, and then it had some spin-offs after that with people with different voices. But I got introduced to Bob the Builder because my grandson would be watching it. And one day I was in the room, and the episode started up, and I start watching a little bit, and I look and I listen. I think, holy crap, Bob the Builder's teaching Zen. So that particular episode, it wasn't a full-length episode, it was a shorts, not quite 2 minutes, and we're going to watch it right now. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I bring to you Bob's Bucket.
Oh no! There's a hole in my bucket.
I know, Bob. That's why I bought you a brand new plastic one.
I've had this bucket for years. It seems a shame just to throw it away.
Well, it can be recycled, you know. We really can't use it for anything, Bob.
Wendy, I know. Make it a megaphone.
Good idea, Scoop. Calling Rolly and Dizzy. Come on, Rolly and Dizzy.
That's a funny-looking megaphone.
Yeah, it looks more like a bongo drum to me.
One bongo drum coming up.
Play it again, Bob.
It's Wendy's turn now.
I know. It's a telescope. I spy with my little eyes something beginning with B.
Bird!
That's right, Dizzy.
Hey, bird! Hello to you too!
Rolly, look out! You're going to...
Oh, what?
Oh no, Rolly! Look what you've done to our drum!
And our megaphone.
And our telescope too.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know I'd squashed so many things.
Never mind, Rolly. It was going to be recycled anyway.
Okay, so have you ever seen so many individuals get so excited about a crappy broken bucket? That's the first Zen teaching from Bob the Builder. Nobody, not Bob, not Wendy, not any of the talking contracting equipment, none of it call it a crappy broken bucket. In addition, no one calls Rolly a clumsy oaf. And I'm just going to guess, being that Rolly is a steamroller, that this is not the first time that Rolly has run over something, and probably not the last. But no one's giving Rolly advice about how to not do that the next time, or scolding Rolly. And the bucket, it's not crappy. And one reason it's not crappy is an understanding that things are perfect as they are. That this is a concept in Zen. Often the example that's given is a table. You have a four-legged table and it's brand new, and you might say that it's perfect. It can hold the Thanksgiving dinner, but say one of the legs breaks off permanently, then you have a three-legged table, and the temptation is to say, that's a crappy table. But it's actually a perfect three-legged table. And our thought may be, but you can't put anything on it, but you're just stuck in the past. You're stuck in the old idea of what you had intended it to be. You personally, you wanted it to be something that would hold dinner. And maybe even the factory that produced it, that was their intention. But it's no longer that. It has changed because nothing's permanent. It's now a three-legged table. And to a small child who likes baseball and who wants to practice pitching with a tennis ball, this three-legged table can become a perfect backstop. And mom and dad don't even care that they take it outdoors because they're not going to use it anymore as a four-legged table. It's flawed. But as what it is, you take it outside, throw the tennis ball against it, scarf it up, no big deal. And even if that table then becomes even more demolished, becomes in pieces, it's still perfect as it is. That just because we can't think of a use for it, that's our own personal. Its perfection is not dependent on if we have a use for it or not. And in the end, even if we can't think of a use, most things in a certain situation and certain circumstances can have a use. In the little house on the prairie days, that totally demolished table can be firewood, keep the whole family from freezing to death. So no temptation to refer to it as a crappy broken bucket. It has changed into something else. It's a bucket with a hole in it. And the second Zen teaching, it's not necessarily a bucket with a hole in it. The labels and names are arbitrary, and they give an illusion of something fixed and permanent. And so when we name something, we kind of put the object into cement. But in this show, they take it away from that. I mean, you need the names. If Bob asked Wendy to bring him the bucket and she brought him a hammer, that would not be good. And construction project would take a very, very long time, even longer than they normally do. So you have the names, you have the labels, they're useful. But they take that object and they completely limit it. As soon as you say it's a bucket, you're saying that's all it can be. And Bob the Builder shows it's a bucket, it's a bongo drum, it's a megaphone, it's a telescope. It's all these things. And, there's an investigative spirit that they have going on here. What can this object be? It's almost kind of liberating. And we can see this when we do in our own lives when we do jury rigging. When something breaks in my home and I need to go to the garage to try and find something that's going to help fix it, some part, when I walk into that garage, I'm walking into a building where nothing has names. Everything is nameless because I'm dropping all the names and I'm looking for something that's maybe so long and either rigid or slightly flexible and blah, blah, blah. And everything is possible. I'm not very good at home repair, so I don't have great examples, but I found some things from the internet I'm going to share. So, you know, in this Bob the Builder episode, we have, is it a bucket? No, it's a megaphone. It's a telescope. So here's a few other items. Is it a couple of pens or is it chopsticks? Is it a tennis racket? Or is it a pasta strainer? Is it a log chain? Or is it a rain downspout? Those first two I got off the internet. That third one, I'd asked my stepson, Chip, who's a park ranger for many years and still works in the parks department. Thought he must have jury rigged some things. But actually, that's just from a friend of his house. And I said, does that really work? He goes, yep. Amazing. Third Zen teaching from this Bob's Bucket episode. Last week, Ekkyo talked about the transcendent practices of a bodhisattva, and the fourth one was joyful efforts. And I think what we see here going on is joyful effort. Joyful effort often refers to references not being lazy, but if you look at the positive aspect of it, it's about, you know, sometimes our effort is very harsh. It's very goal-oriented. I have this bad situation. I'm going to conquer it. And with my wisdom, I'm going to make use of this bucket and I'm going to save some money. And this is just Bob and Wendy and crew just having fun. They're just having fun with impermanence. And often impermanence is something, you know, a lot of times it is something negative. But there's all sorts of impermanent things that happen during our day that aren't, you know, our car is destroyed in an accident. They're small. And we can react very negatively to them when there's really no reason. Bob and crew are just having fun with the Dharma. They're playing with the world of infinite possibilities, and impermanence is fun. The last Zen teaching that I saw in this Bob's Bucket episode was skillful efforts. The six of the eights of the Eightfold Path, the Buddha talked about avoiding unwholesome mind states and creating wholesome mind states. That you know, we can be in a bad mood or be upset or angry, but when it lasts for a long period of time, it can be debilitating. It can cause suffering for ourselves and those around us. And the opposite, when we have positive states of mind, it gives us energy for our practice. And Bob the Builder is full of positive energy. If you have ever watched it, you will hear over and over again and over Bob cry out, "Can we fix it?" And everyone else shouts back, "Yes, we can." So what can be helpful here too, we've looked at the Zen teachings of this Bob the Builder episode. What is the opposite? What is the opposite of Bob the Builder Zen? What is what you might say the anti-Bob? And I have another video to share here. It's not from Bob the Builder. It's an independently produced little film, about 3.5 minutes long. And I'll play it all the way through the end so that the credits show up and that the creators of this, you know, they get credit for what they've done. But anyway, the anti-Bob, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the misguided monk. I love that short. So this guided monk, there's no joy at the beginning, no flexibility. He's doing his motion practice. And this dog, can you imagine Bob? Bob and Wendy, some dog come with a ball. Their reaction would have not been that way. Actually, this particular episode reminds me of the television show Faulty Towers, which was created by John Cleese from Monty Python. And the inspiration, it's a TV show about a hotel clerk that John Cleese plays. And his inspiration was being at a hotel in Germany. And the owner of the hotel, his definite attitude was, I could get some work done if it weren't for all these customers. So that's kind of the monk's attitude here with this dog. I could get some practice done if it weren't for this dog bringing me this ball. But by the end of the episode, this little film, fortunately, the monk becomes a lot more Bob-like, and comes up with an inventive way to keep his motion practice going and take care of the dog at the same time. So that original Bob's Bucket episode really focused on how we give labels and names to objects. But we also give labels and names to events. And we'll label them and try and decide, do I like what just happened? Do I not like what just happened? And we kind of just do this all the time. So I wanted to tell a third story, and no video for this one. I will just tell it. It's about 1,500 years old. I imagine it's an old Taoist story called The Story of the Chinese Farmer and His Son. So here we go. So once upon a time, there was a Chinese farmer and his son, and they had a plow horse, and they had a little bit of land, and they made a living from that. And one day, the plow horse, being old, died. And the other farmers all came by and said to the old farmer, boy, your plow horse died. Going to make farming kind of difficult. You sure are unlucky. And the farmer replied, maybe. So he sent his son out to go to town and see if he could find some cheap horse of some sort. They didn't have much money. While he was going there, his son came across 8 wild horses, and he managed to catch them and bring them back. And the other farmers came by and said, look what your son, this is a treasure. And surely one of these you'll be able to make into a plow horse. You sure are lucky. And the farmer said, well, maybe. Then a few days later, the son, he's trying to break these horses to get one of them to be a plow horse. And one of the horses throws the son and breaks both the son's legs. And the other farmers come and say, oh my God, how are you going to farm with your son? He can't farm for months and months. This is really unlucky. And the farmer says, well, maybe. A couple days later, the Mongolian hordes invade China, and the army comes and takes all the young men away to go and serve in the army. except for the farmer's son, because he's got 2 broken legs. So of no use to the army. The other farmers all come to the old farmer and say, you are so lucky because your son had broken legs. You still have your son. Our sons, we may probably never see them again. You are so lucky. And the farmer thought for a moment, because this really did seem pretty darn lucky. But in the end, all he would say was, maybe. So I think this story, the Bob's Bucket story emphasized joy and kind of playfulness with change. This story emphasizes equanimity. The Buddhist teaching of equanimity, that we can get excited about something, but not too excited. And our practice will be, if something bad happens, we can be upset, but try not to get too upset. And understanding that there's a big picture and all sorts of moving parts. And it's important to, the farmer doesn't say, oh, that's definitely not true. He just says maybe. Sometimes really bad events really are bad, and there really doesn't end up being a flip side to them. And certainly, if something tragic happened to someone, someone they knew died, it'd be about as thoughtless as could be to go up to them and say, well, maybe that's bad luck. Maybe. Don't do that. But I think also this flipping back and forth happens a lot more than what we realize and what we like to think, because when the bad thing's happening, it really gets us down. But, I take a look at, use this as an example, things that happen in politics. I see the Chinese farmer and his son happening all the time. It just goes back and forth. Someone gets elected, you think it's the worst thing, and then something comes from that. Oh, that's good. And then something comes from that. Oh, that's bad. And then something comes from that. It seems to operate that way a lot of time. So I heard this story years and years ago, and I've always wanted to have, my own personal example. But unfortunately, when you get to just examples of the horrific, you can't use those because a lot of times they are really bad. And then something like, Tim, you locked yourself out of the house. That sure is unlucky. And I say, well, maybe. That's okay, but it's kind of a mundane story. It's a little boring. But around 10 years ago, I had something happen to me that fit the bill for being my own personal Chinese farmer and his son story. Something not too extreme, but not too boring. And so that will finish my talk by telling this story, which I have titled, Tim drives to work in the dead of night in the middle of winter and sees a deer in the road. So here we go. Once upon a time, meaning around 10 years ago, I was driving to work in the dead of winter, in the dead of night, in the middle of winter. And to give a little backdrop to this, I start work at 3 o'clock in the morning. So this would be about 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm on the road, 1:30. And I'm also on rural Iowa County roads. So there's no traffic. I see a car about every 2-3 minutes. And on this particular winter day, it was bitter cold. It was 25 degrees below zero, and that was not the wind chill. The wind chill put it in the minus 40s. We'd had a lot of snow in the previous couple of weeks, a whole lot, but at that time, the road was pretty much snow-free. You had those tracks down the center where your tires could follow. That was very clear. So I was doing 55, and I'm pretty cautious, driving, but the road felt safe. And I definitely don't go over the speed limit because of all the deer. The deer in rural roads can be dangerous. A lot of times they just stand along the side and just watch you. But the problem is not the deer that you see. It's all his friends that want to join him that are often on the opposite sides of the road. So I'm driving to work and I get to the top of a hill and I see a deer crossing the road in the middle of a road, real slow, about half a mile down the road. And he'll definitely be off the road by the time I get there. But I know he may have friends. So I start to hit the brakes. But to say that I started to hit the brakes would be kind of an exaggeration. I would say that my foot started to vaguely, microscopically touch the brake pedal. As soon as that happened, my car started to spin clockwise. And I countersteered, and there was like nothing. There wasn't even the hint of any sort of traction. So within around a half a second, I was doing 50 miles an hour backwards down the highway. Within another half a second, I was doing 45 miles an hour and spinning onto the side of the road, and then down a hill with no visibility because there's just snow shooting up all around my car, complete white. But it actually wasn't particularly frightening. And for two reasons. First, it is 1:30 in the morning on an Iowa road. There was no other traffic around. I had no fear of spinning into a semi truck, But the other thing is, once I got off the road and hit the snow, it was like I was in some big giant cushion. There was no herky-jerkiness. It was all gentle. I could feel the car slowing down, and I certainly had no control. I'm just spinning around. So eventually I ended up probably about 40 feet off the road and 30 feet down. And I get out of my car because I don't know a whole lot about carbon monoxide poisoning, but I'm thinking probably my exhaust pipe should not be covered. So I make sure there's no snow in the way of that. And I get back in my car. It's still running. Doesn't seem any worse for the wear. So I can keep my car running and stay warm. And it's now, I'll just wait for one of these cars passing by that comes every 3 to 4 minutes to see me with my lights on in the ditch. And a couple cars go by and they don't stop. And, I know sometimes people have tunnel vision. I certainly have been accused of that. And also, it is bitterly cold. It's 1:30 in the morning. I can certainly understand if someone does not want to stop and say, well, the next person will stop. But after 2 cars go by, I decide I'll flash my lights. So I flash my lights and 3 more cars go by and don't stop. Then another car goes by, they don't stop, but they start to slow down and they pull into the driveway of a farmhouse. I'm like, okay, they're coming back. So, but before they come back, they're sitting there. They're sitting there for the longest time. What are they doing? And then I see the lights turn off in their vehicle, and I can see them get out, and they walk up to their house, presumably to go to bed. So I'm like, okay, this is crazy. So I phone work, and there's someone there that starts work earlier than me, and ask them if they could drive the 5 miles out to come get me. And so they say sure. And then a couple minutes later, a car does stop, and I climb up the hill through the snow and ask if I need a lift. I said, actually, someone's coming, but can I wait here in your car rather than in the ditch? And sure. So we had a nice chat. Very nice guy. So the next day, get back out there, and there's a tow truck driver with a winch, and they pull up my car, and my car is completely unscathed except for 2 things. First, there's some long piece of plastic kind of dripping from it that neither of us know what it is. Later on, my mechanic told me it was a mud guard and not to waste my money replacing it. The other thing was all 4 of my tires were completely flat. But the interesting thing is they weren't broken. When they put air in them, they held air. And I drove on them for many, many more months. That somehow, through all the spinning and all the torque that was involved, it compressed all the air out of the tires without blowing them, which I do not understand the science behind that. But it just goes to show the kind of force that was involved on my car. So 2 aspects that make this my version of the Chinese farmer and his son. The first, going back to about a month ago, there was a blizzard warning for the Midwest, lasted about 3 days. And the first 2 days, I had decided just to get a hotel about a mile from my workplace, because my drive is 35 miles and there was a blizzard warning. And, so, but the 3rd day came, and I was very unclear whether I should stay in the hotel or not, because the snow was all gone. There was no snow, was not going to be coming. And it was going to be very cold with winds. And they said some blowing and drifting snow for sure. But I've driven this road to work for 20, 30 years, whatever it is. I've driven in drifting snow conditions, and when you get the hotel, the first 4 hours of your shift are going to pay for the hotel, and it just kind of grates on you. You think about that, even though in the big picture it doesn't matter, you're still thinking about that. So I'm trying to decide whether to stay in this hotel or not. And I think, this is the exact same weather conditions as when I was spinning around on the road on the black ice. Said, I'm not interested in doing that again. And I shouldn't be clinging to this whole idea of my first 4 hours going toward the hotel. Let's just stay. So I stayed the third night. I've got no crystal ball. Maybe it didn't make any difference, but I think it could be said that this experience I had driving to work gave me an extra sense of caution, which at some point might have really big effects. So someone were to say this horrific story you just told, Tim, where you're spinning around on the road, that you sure were unlucky. I think I would have to say, well, maybe. The other aspect of this story, before this accident on the road, let's go back a couple weeks. When I said we had snow, we had snow. It wasn't buffalo snow, but it was a lot of snow. When you're shoveling your driveway and it's already up chest high along the edges, where do you put the next snowfall? Your driveway just gets narrower and narrower, and you shovel snow and you look out and 2 hours later, you got to go out again. So I don't know, probably some of you here have cursed the snow before. Teresa and I were cursing the snow. We were definitely cursing the snow. But that tow truck driver, he told me if all that snow hadn't been there, I most likely would have rolled 45 miles an hour down the hill rolling. Would I even still be here? So when there's a big snowfall and someone says, wow, look how much snow you're having there in Iowa, Tim, you sure are lucky. My only response has to be, well, maybe. And that's my talk. Open up for comments, things to share, whatever. Anything from anybody?
Hi, Tim. Hi, Tim. Thank you very much for that wonderful talk. I especially like stories, and the last story that you gave was extremely riveting. I was captivated the entire time, and I think I was learning about all of the lessons that you mentioned beforehand while you're telling the story. And I really appreciate the contrast, comparisons. It was, let me put it this way, enlightening. But one other thing that I learned from your talk is I'd never heard the term jury rig before. And I think I've heard of jerry rig.
Oh.
And
maybe,
but I think now that I know the word, the jury rig, it is a word. It makes complete sense, and you've enlightened me once again. So thank you very much.
It probably is supposed to be jerry rigging.
No, I actually looked it up. Jury rigged is correct.
Oh, really?
Jerry rigged is, I think, the term's jerry built, which means poorly built. So over time, the jerry rig became synonymous. I looked it up.
Thank you. Mary?
Thank you, Tim. I really appreciate your talk as well. I love a good story. I also love music. And so the stories were great. And and obviously, a lot of thought went into your Dharma talk. I just wanted to say that the character that I saw for me, that was practicing the Dharma teaching, was the dog in the misguided monk. And I would never be able to be that dog, the four-legged, because I can practice to try to get there, but no, I don't. It's a tall order. So that's my comment.
Yes, that's excellent. The dog was very forgiving, completely 100% forgiving. Anybody else? We got a comment here from Demetric Brown. Say, it kind of went on the screen and off. I like that Bob the Builder was teaching kids how to not take everything for granted, and that you can, in a sense, make anything fun. Yes, there's a playfulness that the whole show has, that particular episode, and that shows up too when we're doing Zazen, and we're part of what we're doing is we're investigating ourselves and who we are, and we can we don't do it with the self-criticism mode. We let that go, and so then it becomes oh, look at how I reacted in that situation today. Under these circumstances, I lost my temper. Interesting. It's interesting, not, oh, what a crappy, broken person I am. Anybody else? Anybody got any jury rig stories, or maybe we're done here? Or
Thanks for the talk, Tim. I like Bob the Builder's energy, and I kind of felt, I guess, like the uptight monk over the time that I was in Mississippi. I was like, I sure could practice if it weren't for all these events and having to go see all this family. Yeah, it's a good reminder. I really appreciate this practice that kind of says, both things are true at the same time. Like, maybe events are good or bad in the longer term, in the bigger vision, but it's okay to get excited about them when they do happen, or to really feel a sense of joy or sadness, like giving ourselves that permission, while also holding that view in the background that there is no permanence, and good things might not actually turn out so good, or bad things might not actually turn out so bad. So yeah, thank you for sharing today.
Perfectly expressed. And I think it's helpful for us, as when something happens that's unexpected during the day, not according to plan, we can ask ourselves, am I greeting this like Bob the Builder? Or am I greeting this like the misguided monk? And it's not always one way. I am certainly the misguided monk more than, I would care to be, but that's, what it is. And we can kind of look at that and aspire to one example of Bob. Jim.
Alex's comments reminded me that there was a Swami that visited MZMC once, and he came with this story of he went off in India in a cave to become enlightened, and when he's in the cave, he's feeling, oh, I'm so lonely, and why don't any of my friends come to visit me? Why don't they see that I have the best of intentions and support me? And then when his friends would come and visit him, he would say, why are these people interrupting me? Why are they getting in my way? And it's like, the whole thing was about attitude, right? Either way, the attitude wasn't quite in alignment with his intentions. So that story really stuck with me because it's really easy to get into that. Oh, this is the negative side of this. And when this switches over to the other side, oh, I can also see the negative side of that. So it's better to be the dog, right? So, but I don't think that dog is going to be jumping over that wall again either.
Of your stories, Tim, I can most identify with the misguided monk, and the also I can from Hokyoji's perspective, I can identify with Bob being the Zen teacher, who's our neighbor. He seems like the Bob in the story. He's just there, just helps out. Nothing fancy. Okay, hole in the bucket. This is what you do. Whatever. So anyway, thank you for your talks.
Thank you, okay. Well, maybe we're done here, Alex.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much for the talk. That was excellent. And thank you, everyone, for your contributions and comments.